My name is Daniel R. Whitford, and I have been working night security at St. Alden Memorial Hospital for almost 3 years. I am 34 years old, recently divorced, and I took the night shift because it paid more and because it kept me busy enough to avoid thinking about all the things I'd rather not think about. Tonight began like any of my routine shifts, though even as I clocked in at 6:58 p.m., I had no idea how badly the next few hours would unravel or how much of what I thought I understood about this building would be peeled back. Everything I'm about to describe took place over the course of one night, this night, and I'm writing it down before sunrise, before exhaustion or doubt has a chance to soften it into something less real. The hospital always feels different after visiting hours end. The white corridors turn hollow, and the air conditioners hum in long, empty stretches. Most of the staff filter out by 9. After that, the place belongs to the few of us who keep it running. The ER crew, the ICU nurses, the lab techs, and the night security guards like me who make slow rounds and pretend the silence doesn't get to us. I started with the West Wing sweep. It's usually the quietest. Pediatrics sits at the far end, lights dimmed to protect sleep cycles, small night lights carved into animal shapes glowing on the walls. I scan my ID card at each checkpoint, the scanner beeping once, twice, the soft, familiar tone that lets me know I'm doing the job right. I didn't expect anything strange. Not at that hour. Not on a Wednesday. As I turned toward the elevator bay, I checked my watch. 7:41 p.m. That was when the first odd thing happened, though at the time I didn't treat it like a major event. One of the elevators, the middle of the 3, lit up and dinged. No one had called it. It slid open, empty, a cavity of perfectly lit beige walls and stainless steel rails. Doors opening on their own happens sometimes. Old wiring, sensors glitching. This building was put up in the late 60s and renovated twice. I didn't think anything of it. Still, something about the way the elevator sat there open, like it was waiting for me, made me pause. I stepped closer and leaned my head in just enough to call out, "Anyone inside?" My voice echoed off the metal. No reply, no movement. I tapped the close button with a knuckle and watched the doors slide shut. When they sealed together, a faint vibration passed through the floor as if the elevator had taken off its speed, way faster than it should have. Too fast for a standard hospital lift. I frowned but moved on, telling myself I was hearing things. By the time I finished the West Wing sweep, it was almost 8:10. I crossed into the central hall that connects all the main departments and saw one of the nurses at the station, a woman named Ellen whom I'd worked alongside for years. She looked tense, folding and unfolding a clipboard. When she noticed me, she gave a small smile but didn't maintain eye contact. "You okay tonight?" I asked. She hesitated. Weird power dips. Nothing serious. Just annoying. I nodded. The lights had flickered once when I passed the lab, but it was barely noticeable. What she said next didn't land with me until much later. "One of the elevators skipped floors again," she murmured. "Maintenance said they fixed that last month." "Skipped how?" "It went from 2 to 5 without stopping at 4. Patient inside panicked. Hit the emergency button." I shrugged lightly, more to reassure her than myself, and told her I'd keep an eye on the panel during my rounds. From there, I circled down to imaging. This part of the hospital always creeps me out a little. The hall is narrow, ceilings lower, lights too bright. Every footstep feels amplified. I finished the checkpoints fast, crossed back toward the main junction, and again, as if on cue, I heard the elevator ding. I swear I hadn't pressed a call button. My hands were at my sides. I turned and saw the same middle elevator open again. This time, the floor indicator above the frame glowed with a number I'd never seen in my entire time working there. B3. Basement levels in this hospital only go down to B2: maintenance, boilers, storage. B3 wasn't real. It didn't exist on any map, any blueprint, any evacuation route. I knew this without even thinking about it. For a solid 10 seconds, I just stared. A cold pressure built behind my ribs. I told myself it was a malfunction. A panel short, a display glitch, a ghost digit, anything. But the doors stayed open, patient and still, as though someone had just stepped out or was waiting for me to step in. A part of me wanted to call maintenance and report it. Another part of me felt ridiculous. I walked closer, slowly, one step at a time. When I reached the threshold, I extended my arm, holding it just past the line of the door to trigger the sensor. Nothing happened. The doors didn't try to close on me. The elevator didn't chime. The air felt unmoving, stale, like it hadn't cycled in a long time. I took a breath and leaned just enough to glance inside. The interior lights flickered, not violently, just slightly, like a dying fluorescent bulb trying to hold itself together. I scanned the small space. Nothing unusual, nothing out of place. Beige walls, metal handrails, floor tile, emergency phone, digital floor panel that still read B3. I left the doors open and backstepped until I was fully in the hall again. My heart thudded faster than it should have. I wasn't scared, not yet, but something felt wrong in a way I couldn't name. I lifted my radio to call for technical support. Before I could press the button, the elevator doors snapped shut, hard, with a force that rattled the frame. The sound echoed down the long corridor. I watched the floor indicator change. B3, B2, B1. Then it stopped. On 5, a soft ding floated down the hall. I waited. No one stepped out. No one had stepped in. I didn't know it then, but that was the moment the night really began. When the elevator settled on 5, I stood there longer than I should have, waiting for someone, anyone, to step out. The silence after the ding felt heavier than the usual nighttime hush, like the air in the corridor had thickened around my ears. I tapped my radio again out of habit, not because I needed to call anyone, but because I needed to hear the faint click just to break whatever weird pressure had settled over the hallway. The click didn't help much. I forced myself to keep moving. Rounds don't stop because an elevator is acting up. I walked toward the central station again, passing the long glass observation panels that looked into empty waiting rooms. Every reflection of myself felt slightly off, like the lights were just a little too warm or too dim, making my face look unfamiliar. My own paranoia, I told myself. Nights like this have a way of messing with you. When I reached the nurse's station, Ellen wasn't there. Her coffee mug sat on the counter, still steaming. A pen rolled from the clipboard onto the floor as if it had just been placed and nudged by a hand. I waited for half a minute, expecting her to walk out of one of the medication rooms, but nothing happened. I reminded myself that nurses move nonstop. She could be anywhere, tending to a patient or grabbing supplies. But something about the abandoned mug unsettled me. I decided to head to the 5th floor. The whole elevator situation had my nerves up, but I told myself it was part of the job. If the elevator was glitching, someone on that floor should have seen or heard something. The stairwell was only 10 steps away. I took it instead of calling the elevator, partly because I wanted to burn the adrenaline off and partly because stepping into that lift felt like standing too close to a quiet animal you aren't sure is tame. The stairwell was colder than the halls, always was, but tonight the drop in temperature felt abrupt. By the time I reached the landing between the third and fourth floors, I could see my breath faintly, like a ghost of vapor drifting in front of me. I rubbed my arms through my jacket. The building had central heating. It should never have been cold enough to see my breath. But I kept going. When I pushed the door for the fifth floor, the warm air hit me right away, almost like stepping into a heated car after a long winter walk. The lights here were brighter than the lower floors. Too bright. It was near blinding. I shielded my eyes for a moment before stepping into the hall. Fifth floor held post-op recovery and overflow beds. At night, only a small section stayed lit, the rest dimmed to half power. That's how it should have been. But all the lights were on. Every room, every hallway, every door open. I whispered, "This isn't right," even though I didn't mean to speak out loud. My voice echoed weirdly, like the hallway swallowed it and returned it thinner. The sensation sent a ripple down my spine. I stepped forward, calling out, "Security doing rounds. Any staff up here?" My voice carried, but nothing answered. I moved past the first two open patient rooms. Both were empty, sheets folded tight, monitors off. No signs of anyone leaving in a hurry. No charts. No belongings. Nothing. I checked the third room. Same thing. Then the fourth. And the fifth. It wasn't until I reached the end of the main hallway that I noticed something that made my pulse spike. The wall clock above the nurse's alcove was stuck at 8:14 p.m. Not frozen, just wrong. I checked my watch. 8:27 p.m. I tapped the glass. My watch was working fine. I looked back up. The hallway clock ticked once. A slow, dragging movement, like its gears were chewing through thick syrup. Then it stopped again on 8:14. I stepped backward instinctively, not because of the clock itself, but because of the sound that came next, faint footsteps. Soft, barely there. Coming from behind me, I spun around. The long corridor behind me was empty. The lights hummed overhead, but the footsteps continued, steady, spaced apart like someone walking at an unhurried pace. Only they weren't coming from behind me anymore. They were coming from the elevator bay. I walked toward the sound without meaning to, drawn by some reflex from years on the job. That's what security does. We go toward the things that sound wrong. I turned the corner and saw the three elevators lined up. Only the middle one had lights on inside. The door was half open. Not stuck, not glitching, half open. Slanted. 10 inches of space at the bottom, 3 inches at the top, like the doors were twisted on their tracks. A cold draft seeped out from the narrow gap, brushing over my shoes. It smelled like the basement. Concrete dust, metal, and something faintly earthy. I crouched, not wanting to, but drawn to look inside that uneven slit. The lights inside flickered again. Not like earlier, it was slower now, dimmer. And in the few seconds the light stabilized, I saw something that made my breath catch. The floor panel didn't show 5. It didn't show B3 either. It showed B6. A floor that absolutely did not exist in this building. I straightened up too fast, nearly losing my balance. The footsteps I'd heard earlier had stopped completely, replaced by a hum. An electrical throb deep within the shaft. I backed away, hand on my radio. For the first time tonight, I felt real fear. Not the creeping unease from earlier, but the kind you feel when you're standing too close to a ledge in the dark and you know one wrong step could end everything. I pressed the radio button. "Dispatch, this is Whitford on 5, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Do we have any active maintenance on elevators tonight? Any techs logged in the building?" Silence. I pressed again, harder. Dispatch copy? Nothing. The radio wasn't dead. I could still hear the faint static. It just wasn't receiving, or someone wasn't answering. I turned toward the stairwell, deciding it was time to get out of this floor and find someone, anyone, who could explain what was happening. Before I reached the door, the elevator behind me made a sound low enough to vibrate the soles of my shoes. Then the warped doors began to slide open, wider and wider, slow, like something on the other side was pushing them apart. I didn't stay to watch. I ran. I didn't look back as I ran. I didn't want to see what was forcing those doors open. The stairwell was only 20 feet away, but it felt impossibly far. The lights above me flickered as I sprinted, each flash of darkness stretching just a little too long, like the building couldn't decide how long night should last. My hand slammed against the stairwell bar, and I shoved myself through. The heavy door swung shut behind me with a metallic thud loud enough to echo up the entire shaft. I gripped the rail, breathing hard. The stairwell was warm again, which should have calmed me, but instead it made everything worse. The temperature changed too fast, too sharply, like I'd crossed into a different building entirely. I forced myself downward, 5th floor to 4th, 4th to 3rd. My footsteps bounced off concrete walls, the sound reassuring in its normalcy, right up until I reached the landing between 2 and 1. There, every light in the stairwell shut off at the same time. Instant black. Not dim, not flickering. Black. I froze on the step, gripping the rail so tightly my knuckles cracked. The darkness wasn't natural. It swallowed everything. My body felt suspended in it. My breathing sounded too loud. I lifted a hand in front of my face and saw nothing. Not even silhouette, not even faint motion. I whispered, "No, no, no, come on," and tapped the wall blindly, searching for the emergency switch I knew was near the landing. My fingers brushed cold metal. I flicked it. Nothing. I flicked again. Still nothing. Behind me, far above, something moved. Not footsteps. Not mechanical noise from pipes. Not any sound I could rationalize. More like a slow, deliberate dragging, fabric sliding across concrete, or something heavy being pulled lightly, carefully, so carefully that the intention behind it crawled beneath my skin. I reached for my radio again. "Dispatch. This is Whitford. I need someone to respond. Any unit, any floor. Something's wrong up here." Static. Then a tone I had never heard on our frequency. A long, low beep that vibrated the device in my hand. Then another. 3 in total. The dragging above me stopped. I moved. Not calmly, not strategically. I rushed downward, my feet barely staying under me as I descended each step in total darkness. I counted flights by muscle memory alone. Landing, turn, steps, landing, turn, steps. I kept one hand on the rail, knuckles scraping the metal. I needed to reach the first floor. Just the first floor. Lights, staff, people. The dragging sound resumed. Only this time it was below. I stopped so abruptly my shoulder slammed the wall. The sound was moving upward, slow, steady, as if whoever or whatever it was had simply waited for me to come to them. My chest tightened. I backed upward 2 steps, directionless and blind. "Hello!" I called out, hating how desperate it sounded. The dragging stopped immediately. Silence ballooned outward, thick enough to feel pressing against my ears. For 3 seconds, nothing moved. Then something tapped the rail below me, just once, lightly, as if a finger had traced it. I shot through me. I took a breath so sharp it hurt my ribs and pushed myself upward again, climbing into blind panic. I didn't care where I was going anymore. I just needed light, any light. I reached a landing and shoved at the door, hoping it would be unlocked. It opened. I stumbled into the hallway without looking, letting the door swing behind me. The overhead lights were on, steady and bright. I blinked hard, squinting as my eyes adjusted. A heavy, nauseating relief washed through me, until I realized the hallway I'd entered wasn't on any floor I recognized. There were no wall signs, no department labels, no artwork, no directional arrows, no staff station, just a long, sterile hallway that stretched too far in both directions, painted the same off-white as every hospital corridor but lacking everything else that made a hospital functional. And it smelled wrong, not like antiseptic or old carpet or latex gloves, more like dust, damp dust, the scent of a building wing that hadn't been used in years. I turned left first, walking slowly. My footsteps felt too loud again, like the sound was bouncing off bare walls instead of filling a normal space. I kept touching my radio to reassure myself it was still there. Every room I passed was empty, completely stripped. No beds, no desks, no monitors. Just hollow rooms. An entire wing of emptiness. I kept moving until I saw something at the far end of the hallway. A door slightly ajar, with a faint glow leaking through the crack. Warm light, like a lamp or a computer monitor. Something human. I didn't run, but I walked faster. When I reached it, I pressed my hand against the surface of the door. Felt warm, warmer than it should have. I nudged it open with my shoulder. Inside was a reception desk. Old, dated equipment sat on it. Computers I hadn't seen since early 2000s models, a bulky CRT monitor, a metal lamp with a pull chain. A faint hum filled the room, and a single chair sat tucked under the desk. For the first time since the night began, I exhaled. This room felt like a place where someone had been, where someone might even still be. I stepped further in. That was when I saw the clipboard lying on the desk. Patient check-in sheet. Dated March 18th, 1992. Every signature looked faded, handwritten, aged. Some names I didn't recognize, but a few I did. Long-term patients who had died years ago. My eyes moved down the list. My throat tightened when I saw the last name. Whitford, Daniel R. Security, logged 8:14 p.m. Status, unreturned. The pen sitting next to the clipboard rolled slowly, like someone had just set it down moments before I'd entered. Behind me, the hallway lights began shutting off one by one. Pop, 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 marching toward the door in a straight line. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. Something was walking with those lights. I kept my eyes locked on the clipboard even as the hallway lights died sequentially. Each pop sounding closer, sharper, more intentional than the last. The room's lamp was the only light left, dim and yellow, casting a small, trembling circle across the desk surface. I could hear the footsteps now, slow, steady, the same deliberate pattern I'd heard in the stairwell. Whoever was out there didn't rush. They didn't need to. They knew exactly where I was. I backed away from the desk, the floor creaking lightly beneath me. The hospital shouldn't creak. The floors here were concrete covered with linoleum, no wood, no give. But the ground shifted under my shoes like the building itself was older in this wing. Like I'd stepped into a part of it that hadn't been updated in decades. The lamp flickered once, then again. I looked at the door. Half an inch of darkness had already seeped inside. The lights behind it continued dying one by one until only faint blackness pressed against the threshold. The footsteps stopped right at the edge of the door, and for a heartbeat I thought I could hear breathing, slow, rhythmic, almost curious. I reached for the lamp's pull chain. Every instinct screamed at me to keep the room lit, but my hand moved anyway. I yanked the chain. The lamp snapped off, and everything went silent. I stood in pitch black, the air heavy and unmoving as if the room itself was holding its breath. I didn't dare shift my feet. I forced myself to inhale through my nose, hoping the sound wouldn't carry. Something moved inches from the doorway, a soft scrape, like fingers brushing along the floor. Then another sound, closer, the faint vibration of the linoleum under slow, deliberate weight. I turned the lamp back on. The circle of light burst into the room, weak but enough to illuminate the doorway. No one stood there, but the door had moved. It was no longer ajar, it was wide open, and beyond it the hallway was lit again, but not in the way it had been before. The lights were too spaced out, narrow cones of brightness cutting down the long corridor. It looked less like a hospital and more like an abandoned maintenance tunnel someone had tried to dress up. The empty rooms were still there, but the doors were missing entirely. Just raw frames, bare studs, and further down the hall, a sign hung crookedly from the ceiling. I stepped out cautiously and approached it, reading the faded letters. Ward C, closed. Effective July 1993. I had never heard of Ward C. It didn't exist on any map, any orientation packet, any emergency drill. This wing shouldn't have existed, yet here it was, stretching into dimness like a forgotten limb of the building that someone had tried to erase. A soft hum rose behind me. I turned. The reception room's lamp was flickering again, the pull chain swaying even though I hadn't touched it. My heart hammered so hard I thought the chain might sink with it. Then I noticed something I hadn't seen before. On the reception desk, beside the clipboard, an old wall-mounted landline phone handset had been lifted off its cradle. It hung loose, swinging slightly. No wind, no draft, nothing to make it move. The swinging stopped. The phone speaker crackled. A voice, sharp, clipped, mechanical, whispered through it. 814. I froze. 814, return to station. The voice sounded familiar, not a person, but a recording. The same robotic system voice used during emergency drills in the hospital. But we didn't have a drill scheduled. Not today. Not at night. Not with only a skeleton crew. Static filled the speaker. Then the voice again, louder this time. Whitford, return to station. 8:14 p.m. A chill radiated from my spine, spreading through my limbs. 8:14 p.m. again. The time that kept showing up. The elevator stopping. The hallway clock freezing. The signature next to my name. Something in this part of the building was looping around that time, or holding to it. Slowly, carefully, I stepped into the hall again. I needed to find a connecting stairwell, a door, anything that tied this place back to the real hospital. This wing must have been sealed years ago. Maybe they'd built over it. Maybe the elevator glitch dropped me into some maintenance access no one remembered. But the more I walked, the more wrong the hall became. The walls changed first, color draining from off-white to a dull, decaying beige. Paint peeling in long strips. Metal rails rusting along the sides. The smell intensified. Dust, mold, something old and stale trapped under the scent of cleaning chemicals that hadn't been used in decades. The lights buzzed overhead, one after another. Then I reached an intersection, a four-way split. None of these existed in the current layout of the hospital. Nothing matched. No windows. No signs except one to my left. A door with frosted glass and a metal label barely hanging on. Security office. Ward C. I stood still long enough that my breathing steadied. The air here was warmer, stale but breathable. The hallway felt less predatory with the door in sight. I reached for the knob. The metal was warm, too warm, like someone had been touching it from the other side. I turned it anyway. The door opened silently. Inside was an office. My office, but older, dusty. Outdated files stacked on mismatched shelves. 2 metal desks pushed together. A wall-mounted clock stuck on. 8:14 p.m. On the desk closest to me sat another clipboard. My name was at the top. A list underneath. Security presence REQ. Night shift Ward C. Monitor elevator access. Prevent unauthorized exits. Record non-compliant personnel. Return to floor of origin. My eyes skimmed further. At the bottom of the page, in small, tight handwriting, once elevators open, do not re-enter hallway. Return to designated floor. Remain until collected. Collected. My stomach twisted into a knot. A soft ding echoed behind me, the sound of an elevator arriving. But not from the hall I'd walked through. From the right, a hallway that hadn't been there a second ago. I turned toward the sound, slowly, afraid of what I'd see. A single elevator stood at the end of the hall. Doors open. Floor panel glowing faintly. B3. The warm air in the office dropped sharply. My breath fogged again. The lights dimmed. Something in the walls began to hum. A vibration deep enough to rattle loose dust from the ceiling. The elevator doors held open, patient and unmoving, as though waiting for me specifically. The radio on my shoulder crackled violently. Then a whisper. Whitford, return. I didn't want to. Every instinct in me screamed not to. But the hallway behind me had gone impossibly dark. And something was standing in it. Breathing. Slow. Patient. Waiting for me to choose. I didn't look directly at the shape in the dark. Couldn't. Even seeing it from the corner of my eye made something inside me twist like a fist closing around my throat. It wasn't tall or short, not clearly human or anything else. It was just a presence. A solid patch of black in an already dark hallway, darker than it should have been, deep enough that it felt like a doorway cut into nothing. His breathing wasn't loud, but it was steady, measured, too calm. The elevator chimed again, the soft, perfectly normal hospital chime that felt completely out of place in this nightmare of a wing. B3 glowed on the panel, bright, crisp, as if that floor really existed somewhere beneath the hospital. The shadow shifted its weight, not stepping forward, just adjusting, like it was getting comfortable watching me struggle to make a choice. I moved toward the elevator, not because I wanted to, because every part of me knew staying near that thing was worse. My legs felt gelled, rubbery, disconnected from the rest of my body, but they obeyed enough to get me halfway down the hallway. The elevator's interior light flickered once, dimming, then returned to full brightness. It almost looked warm in there, like a refuge, like stepping into it would end all of this. The hallway behind me stayed silent. I stepped inside. The doors didn't close immediately. They lingered open, as if giving the darkness behind me one last chance to pull me back. I could still hear the breathing, slow, steady, patient. It didn't move. Then, with a gentle hiss, the doors slid shut. The elevator stuttered once, like the cables strained under unexpected weight, then began descending. No mechanical chatter, no floor announcements, just a long, smooth drop. Too smooth, I gripped the railing, trying to steady my thoughts. The hospital only had 2 basements. Even if this was some forgotten service shaft or decommissioned section from decades ago, the drop shouldn't have taken this long. The digital floor panel pulsed with soft light. B3, B3, B3. It didn't change. The elevator didn't stop. My ears began to pop, pressure shifting as if I were descending down a mountain. I swallowed, trying to adjust. The fluorescent bulb above me flickered but held. My watch ticked silently on my wrist, but when I checked the time, my breath stalled. It still read 8:14 p.m. I shook it, slapped it, held it up to the light. Still 8:14 p.m. Seconds weren't passing. The elevator slowed. A faint shiver crawled through the rails under my hands. It stopped. The doors slid open. A long, low corridor stretched ahead, lit by a thin row of fluorescents that seemed to buzz louder than normal. This level looked less like a hospital and more like the underbelly of one. Exposed concrete, old pipes, electrical conduits strapped to the ceiling with metal brackets. Everything smelled. Dust, old wiring, something damp and metallic. A faded sign hung crookedly above the entrance to the corridor. B3 Archive Storage. Archive Storage. That part made some sense. Old records had to go somewhere. But none of the staff had ever mentioned this floor, and I'd never seen it on the blueprints. Even if it was decommissioned, even if it had been sealed, why would an elevator still connect to it? Why would the power still run? I stepped out slowly. The elevator doors stayed open. I moved deeper into the corridor, listening to the heavy hum of the old lights. They flickered in irregular patterns, like they were responding to something unseen. I turned left, following the wall. Rows of old file cabinets stretched along one side. Rust coated many of them. Dust blanketed everything. Most of the drawers were labeled with department codes I recognized, ER, OB, ICU, but the labels were old, handwritten, and yellowed. Some drawers hung open slightly, paper corners poking out like fingernails. At the end of the corridor was a metal door with a slot for a keycard. The card reader was dead. A faint scratching drifted from inside. I stepped backward, pulse kicking hard in my throat. The scratching stopped immediately, like whatever was behind the door was listening. I turned. The elevator was gone. Not the doors. The entire elevator. Just empty concrete wall where it had been. I blinked rapidly, rubbing my eyes. I walked up and touched the wall. Solid, dusty, cold. No seam, no panel, no outline. It wasn't like hidden doors in movies. This was smooth, continuous structure. Like the elevator never existed here at all. A hum vibrated through the floor. Then the intercom system crackled overhead, static at first, then a voice. Whitford, return to floor of origin. The voice wasn't the emergency drill voice anymore. It was harsher, breathier, like someone was trying to mask their voice and failing. Return to floor of origin. My stomach twisted. Floor of origin. What did that even mean? My shift started on ground level. Did it want me to find a way up? Through what? Solid concrete? The intercom snapped off. Silence flooded the corridor again. Then the lights overhead dimmed. Not all at once. One by one, like something was walking down the corridor toward me, cutting the power with each step. I moved back, fumbling for anything, any tool, weapon, anything to defend myself. My fingers brushed cold metal. A cabinet drawer half open. I pulled it the rest of the way out. Inside, instead of files, were personal items. Watches, glasses, badges. Name tags. I picked one up with my shaking hand. The security badge. Daniel R. Whitford. Night security. Deactivated. March 1992. The rest of the items in the drawer were similar. Every badge showed the same date. Every badge listed a different name. Every badge belonged to someone whose name I recognized from old hospital memorial plaques. The staff who died over the years. I stumbled backward, dropping the badge. Behind me, the last overhead light flickered violently. The corridor plunged into near darkness. Only one light remained, far behind me, at the very end. A figure stood under it, not moving, not breathing, just watching. The intercom clicked on again, voice distorted beyond recognition. Whitford returned. The light above the figure went out. Darkness swallowed it whole. I turned and ran deeper into B3. Anywhere away from whatever was coming. I ran without knowing where I was going, my footsteps echoing in a corridor that seemed to twist longer the more I moved. The concrete walls felt too close, the air too dense, like B3 wasn't built for people to breathe in. Every inhale tasted metallic, old, stale, like the air had been trapped down here since the hospital first opened decades ago. I glanced behind me only once. Blackness swallowed everything. No figure, no light, no sound of pursuit. But I knew it was there. I could feel it, the same slow, measured presence I'd sensed in the stairwell. The one that didn't rush because it didn't need to. It knew I couldn't escape this floor any more than I could walk out of my own shadow. The corridor split ahead, left or right. I veered right without thinking, nearly slipping on a pool of standing water that glistened under a faint flickering bulb. Pipes lined the ceiling overhead, dripping occasionally with rhythmic taps like a broken metronome. I kept moving. My radio crackled once on my shoulder, so sharp and sudden I flinched. Wit FD. Static engulfed the rest. Then silence. Not even static after that. Dead. I pressed the button out of habit. Dispatch, please. Anyone. Respond. Nothing. Just me. And the sound of distant dragging, faint but unmistakable. Further ahead, the corridor widened into what looked like an old supply hub. Shelves once stocked with linens and equipment now stood barren, coated in thick gray dust. In the center of the room, an overturned metal gurney lay on its side. One was still spinning lazily as if it had been bumped moments before I arrived. But nothing had touched it. I hadn't even stepped near it yet. It spun slower, then stopped with a soft metallic clicking sound that echoed too loudly. I approached the far door, one hand trailing along the wall, grounding myself. The doorknob here was old, brass, tarnished nearly black. I hesitated, listening. Silence. I pushed through. The next hallway branched again, but this time one direction was glowing faintly with warm, golden light. Not the harsh fluorescence of the hospital, more like lamplight. Human, familiar, safe. I approached slowly, my heartbeat loud enough to drown my footsteps. At the end of the hallway sat a single wooden door. Wooden, not metal, not reinforced. Not like the rest of the hospital. It looked like it belonged in a house, not a basement. Its varnish was slightly peeled, edges worn down, a brass number plate nailed near the top. 14. Room 14. Something about the number made the back of my neck prickle. I didn't know why. I'd never seen this door in my entire time working here. I wasn't even sure the hospital had a room 14 in any basement level. But the light underneath, warm and soft, pulled at me. I raised a hand and knocked once. The sound that followed wasn't what I expected. Not movement, not footsteps. A voice, a woman's voice, soft, trembling, exhausted. Please help. Every hair on my arms stood up. I stepped back from the door, scanning the hallway. Nothing, just me. The air felt still but not empty, more like something held its breath along with me. I leaned in again. "Hello!" My voice cracked. "Please," the woman whispered. "Don't leave me here." My throat tightened. "I'm not leaving. Who are you?" No answer. The light under the door flickered. Once, twice, then steadied. I tried the doorknob. Locked. I knocked again. Harder this time. "Ma'am, I'm security. If you're trapped, I can call for." My voice died when I realized the stupidity of what I was saying. The radio didn't work. My phone didn't either. No one knew where I was. No one even knew B3 existed. The voice came again, closer this time, like her mouth was against the other side of the door. "Please open it." My hand trembled as I wrapped my fingers around the knob. The brass felt warm, too warm, like someone had just held it from the other side. A shiver crawled across my scalp. I twisted. The lock clicked. The door creaked open half an inch. Warm light poured out into the dim corridor, softer than anything else on the floor. I pushed the door gently, letting it open fully. Inside was patient room, not storage, not a basement cell. A real patient room, bed, small table, old heart monitor, cabinets. All outdated but normal. Clean, quiet. The walls were yellowed with age, but the bed sheets were folded neatly, freshly laundered. The lamp on the bedside table cast a warm pool of light that made everything look strangely peaceful. But the room was empty. No patient, no woman, no one. Just the soft hum of the lamp bulb. I stepped inside slowly, searching. Behind the curtain, behind the door, in the small restroom, nothing. No sign of life. No footprints in the thin dust that covered the corners. No indent in the bed. No movement. But the voice I'd heard was real. I know it was. I turned back toward the hallway. The door slammed shut. The lamp flickered violently. Something pressed against the other side of the door. Lightly at first, then harder, like palms sliding down the wood. My breath caught. The doorknob rattled. Not violently, slowly, like someone testing it. I backed toward the far wall, gripping the railing of the empty bed for balance. The room felt smaller now, warmer, air thick enough to choke on. A soft whisper seeped through the door crack. "Return to floor of origin." The lamp dimmed as if something unseen was standing between me and the light. Nobody touched the doorknob now. Nobody whispered again. Instead, footsteps moved away, slow at first, then quicker. Then the lights in the corridor outside clicked off one by one, heading further down the hall. Away from me, the darkness moved, searching, not for me, for something else. I exhaled shakily and reached for the doorknob. Turned easily now. The door swung open without resistance. The hallway was dark except for a single light far down near the end. Faint flicker. I stepped out carefully, ready to go the opposite direction. Any direction that took me away from whatever had been whispering through that wood. Then I saw something on the floor right outside room 14. A security badge. My security badge. Not the one clipped to my uniform. The old one. The one from the drawer. Deactivated. March 1992. A chill ran through me so violently I nearly dropped it. Because beneath it, Written in black marker directly on the floor tiles were 3 words: "You already returned." The light at the end of the hall flickered once. Then, unmistakably, someone stepped into it, not walking toward me, waiting. The figure stood at the far end of the hallway, perfectly framed in that weak, flickering cone of light, not moving, not shifting its weight, not breathing, not that I could hear anyway, just waiting. The light blinked once, and for that fraction of a second the silhouette sharpened. Shoulders slightly slumped, head tilted, arms hanging too straight at its sides. I didn't blink. I didn't dare. The hallway behind me was nothing but darkness stretching into more darkness. The only light left was the one illuminating that figure, and it stood between me and every possible way out. My hand tightened around the badge I'd picked off the floor. The plastic edges dug into my palm. Deactivated. March 1992. The handwriting on the tile beneath my boots looked freshly written. The marker lines weren't cracked or faded. Something had written that message moments ago. The figure finally moved. Not toward me, just slightly. I watched its head shift, angling as if it were trying to see me more clearly from across the hall. A subtle, almost curious tilt, like an animal studying a sound. I tried to step backward, but my spine hit the wall of room 14's doorway. Trapped. If I made noise, it would hear. But standing still wasn't an option either. Not when every instinct in my body screamed to run. The light flickered again. This time, when it returned, the figure was closer. Much closer. Half the distance. I hadn't heard it move. I didn't know if it had stepped, or if the hallway itself had shortened, or if the light had simply decided to show me a different truth. I forced myself to breathe evenly. Panic would ruin me. My vision would blur. My senses would scatter. I needed clarity. I needed to think. Return to floor of origin. The messages repeated that phrase again and again. On the clipboard, on the intercom, through the door, written across the tiles. Maybe that was the only way out. Maybe going deeper into B3 was the mistake all along. Maybe I needed to reverse everything, find whatever had brought me down here, and force it to take me back. A click echoed through the corridor. My eyes snapped to the figure. It hadn't moved, but the light above it dimmed just a bit, like something brushed against the bulb. That was enough. I pushed myself off the doorway, moving as quietly as I could to the right. Not toward the figure, toward a narrow corridor branching off near room 18. I hadn't explored it, could loop back, or dead end, or drop me even deeper. But any unknown felt safer than standing in front of that thing. The figure didn't react at first. I took another step, and another, halfway to the side corridor. The light flickered. The figure vanished. My heart seized in my chest. I bit down hard on my tongue to keep from making a sound. I spun around, scanning the dark stretch behind me. Nothing. The hallway overhead, nothing. The ceiling, nothing. Then, at the precise moment my pulse began to steady, I felt a shift in the air behind me. Warm, close, human height. Something breathed against the back of my neck. I didn't turn, couldn't. My muscles locked so completely my knees nearly buckled. That warm breath, slow, measured, exhaled deliberately, hit my skin in steady waves, as if whatever stood behind me wanted me to know it was real, solid, close enough to touch. My mouth was so dry I could barely swallow. The breath moved from the back of my neck to my left ear. A pause. Then a whisper so low it seemed to vibrate through bone rather than air. You shouldn't have opened the door. My vision went white for a second. My entire body jolted. I stumbled forward, nearly falling, finally turning and throwing myself down the narrow side corridor. My shoulder hit the wall hard enough to bruise, but I didn't stop. I ran, feet scraping against the floor, lungs burning, heart slamming against my ribs. The corridor twisted sharply left, then right, then sloped downward, the floor uneven, cracked in places. Pipes overhead dripped a slow, rhythmic beat like a countdown. My mind spun. Where was this leading? Another dead end? Another locked door? Another wing of rooms stuck in decades-old time? The corridor turned again, and the walls changed from bare concrete to old tile. The smell shifted too, less mold, more chemical, like antiseptic long dried into the grout. Then I saw it. A sign above a rusted double door. Service Elevator 3. My breath caught. A service elevator. Maybe the one that led me here. Maybe not. But even if it wasn't, any elevator meant a chance. A chance to get back to any floor that wasn't B3. I rushed toward it. As I approached, my boots slid on something slick. I caught myself on the handle. I looked down. Water. Fresh water. A thin line seeping from beneath the elevator doors, spreading across the floor in a shimmering trail. Why water? From where? I hit the call button. Nothing happened. No light. No sound. I pressed it again. Harder. Still nothing. I backed up and rammed my shoulder into the metal doors. They rattled but held. I tried again, throwing my weight harder this time. The metal groaned. A small gap appeared between the doors, no more than an inch. But dark water began to rise inside that gap. Not dripping, not seeping, rising, like the elevator car on the other side was filled almost to the brim. I staggered back in horror as the water surged upward another inch, then another, pushing against the door like fingers trying to pry it open from the inside. The lights overhead flickered. The intercom crackled. The voice, broken, distorted, layered, whispered, "Whitford, do not open." The rising water grew darker, heavier, then stopped. Silence. The hallway behind me creaked. A soft sigh, human, close, rolled across the back of my neck again. The voice whispered, "You can't return if you never left." I turned slowly. The figure stood an arm's length away, his head tilted gently, and for the first time, I realized who it was. The figure's face eased out of the shadows as if the light abated, not the other way around. Features sharpened. A jawline I knew too well, a nose slightly crooked from a childhood fall, tired eyes edged with sleeplessness. My own face. It was me, but older, or maybe worn down, frayed, stretched thin by years in this floor. I didn't move, couldn't. My brain felt like someone had unplugged everything except pure fear. The other me tilted his head just slightly, the way I sometimes do when I'm trying to understand something that doesn't make sense. He blinked. I blinked at the same time. Perfect mirror. Except his eyes weren't brown like mine. They were washed out gray, color drained like an old photograph left too long in the sun. He took a step forward. My heel scraped back instinctively. He smiled, not wide, not friendly. Just a tired, almost apologetic curl of the lips. "I tried," he whispered, voice rasping like in used vocal cords. "I tried so many times. I swallowed so hard it sounded like a crack in the silent hall." He stepped closer again. His movements were slow, stiff, like someone walking after weeks of bed rest. Water dripped from his sleeves. dark water like the kind behind the elevator doors. His uniform clung to him, the same style as mine but faded, torn at the seams, badge missing. His skin was pale, too pale, like someone who hadn't seen daylight in years. "I didn't want to leave you with it," he murmured. "But you opened the door. They always open the door." My throat tightened. "You're not real." He smiled faintly. "I wasn't. Not at first." I shook my head, shaking my entire body with it. "This is a hallucination. Stress, lack of air, CO2 buildup in a sealed floor." He cut me off with a raised hand. "You think I didn't tell myself that? The first night." His tone hardened. "The first week." He stepped close enough that I could feel the cold radiating off him, like standing next to an open freezer. "The first year." My stomach dropped. "No," I whispered. "No, I'm not you. I can get out." He leaned forward, his face inches from mine. He didn't breathe. His chest didn't rise. "You already came back, Daniel," he whispered. "You returned at 8:14. That's when it takes you. That's when it keeps you." He raised a trembling, waterlogged hand and pointed behind me. I turned. The service elevator doors were open now, completely open without me ever hearing them split. Water pooled out onto the hallway floor, spreading in thin, oily sheets. The overhead lights flickered violently, sputtering in and out like dying stars. Inside the elevator, a uniform, mine, not torn, not waterlogged, but clean, pressed, perfect, laid out like clothing prepared for a body in a morgue. The floor indicator above the doors glowed. Floor of origin. My chest tightened. "What does that mean?" The other me answered behind me. "It means the floor you died on." I spun back toward him. His expression didn't change. "You slipped," he whispered, voice cracking. "All those nights doing rounds. The wet floor sign wasn't out. You fell. Hit your head. Time of death, 8:14 p.m. They tried to revive you." He blinked slowly. "But you never left the building." The hallway swayed around me. The concrete, the pipes, the dripping water, they warped like heat haze. My pulse hammered so loudly I barely realized I'd started shaking my head. "That's not true," I said. "I walked in tonight. I clocked in. I saw staff. I spoke to Ellen." The other me stepped closer, eyes tired, empty. "You've done that every night." My breath stopped. "You're replaying your shift." The lights above us popped one by one, plunging the hall deeper into shadow. "You walk the same corridors, check the same rooms, hear the same elevator ding. Every time you end up here." He stepped beside me, shoulder brushing mine, cold as ice. "And every time you remember a little more." I backed away, stumbling into the wall. "No, I remember everything. I ran. I got lost. The floors changed. The building. That's because you fight it." His voice grew sharp. "You fight the part where you understand you never leave. You cling to whatever makes sense. That's why the hospital builds floors, hallways, rooms, anything to distract you, anything to keep you walking." The intercom crackled overhead. "Whitford, return." The voice was layered now, hundreds of voices, some sobbing, some screaming, some whispering, some broken. Footsteps echoed from the dark behind the other me. Too many footsteps to count. Approaching, surrounding, filling B3 with a chorus of life that had no lungs. He looked at me with enormous sadness. "You're the newest," he whispered, "and the last piece of you that still feels alive doesn't want to let go. But you have to, or this floor never stops. The water from the elevator surged once, rising up, licking at my boots. Cold, so cold it burned. The other me placed a hand on my shoulder. His skin was soft, almost fragile. "You have to return," he said. I stared at the elevator. The uniform, the panel glowing floor of origin, the water churning like something weighted beneath its surface. "No," I said, voice shaking. "I'm going back up. I'm leaving this floor. I'm leaving this hospital." A faint smile spread across his cracked lips. "You said that the last time." I backed away. The other me didn't stop me. He simply watched. And behind him, dozens, maybe hundreds, of shapes moved silently in the dark, all wearing fragmented versions of my uniform, all with gray, drained eyes, all waiting. The intercom boomed one final time, louder than I'd ever heard it. "Whitford, return now." The water surged into a wave. The elevator lights burst into blinding white, and something began rising from the water, slowly, like a body pushed upward to the surface. I ran. I didn't wait to see what it was. I didn't listen to what the voices screamed after me. I ran blindly into the dark hallways of B3, the place that had been waiting for me long before I ever stepped inside its elevator. I sprinted through the dark, deeper into the maze of B3, not caring where the hallway bent or how the floor sloped. My pulse hammered so violently I could barely hear my own footsteps over it. Pipes burst somewhere behind me, a rush of water spraying in the distance like the building was exhaling through broken lungs. The air turned colder, sharper, suffocating enough that each breath scraped down my throat. I didn't know where I was going. I only knew I couldn't go back. Not to the elevator. Not to that thing rising from the water. Not to the other me. The corridor forked ahead. Left. Darkness. Right. A faint, weak glow, barely the size of a match flame. I swerved right, boots slipping on the wet floor. The glow grew clearer with each step, turning into a blinking red emergency exit sign. My breath caught in my chest. An exit. Not a real one, maybe, but the only one I had. I ran harder. A voice boomed behind me. Deep, layered, so loud the walls trembled. "Whitford, floor of origin. Return." The tiles under my feet quivered. Dust fell from the ceiling. Something heavy crashed in the darkness behind me. A wet, slithering drag following it. I didn't look back. The exit sign flickered. Bright, dim, fighting to stay alive. I reached the end of the hall. A metal door stood beneath the sign. Thick, industrial. Steel bars welded across it in angles that didn't make sense, like a cage or a barricade meant to keep something inside. There was no handle, just a push plate covered in rust. I slammed my shoulder into it. It didn't budge. I hit it again, and again. The metal groaned, soft, like it was waking up. Behind me, the dragging sound accelerated. Not crawling, running, fast. I threw myself at the door one more time, ignoring the scream of pain that shot through my shoulder. This time it moved, half an inch, then another. I wedged my fingers into the gap and pulled. The metal fought me with a strength that didn't feel mechanical. It felt alive, resisting. A wet breath drifted across the back of my neck. Too close. I pulled the door wider, wide enough to slip through. As I stepped forward, something grabbed my shirt collar from behind. Cold, slimy, strong. I didn't think. I didn't breathe. I dropped to the ground and rolled forward. My shirt tore. The grip missed my throat by an inch. Hands, human hands, slapped against the metal as I slid through the gap. Hands wearing versions of my own uniform. I shoved the door closed with everything I had. The slam echoed through the darkness like a gunshot. The dragging and pounding stopped instantly. Silence swept over everything. But the temperature was different now. Warmer. The smell of antiseptic and carpet dust replaced the damp concrete stench. The hum of fluorescent lights was familiar again. Not broken, not distorted, not layered with whispers. I pushed myself upright. I was in a hallway, a normal one, bright, clean, modern. The West Wing. My heart raced so violently it hurt. I braced myself against the wall, wheezing through disbelief. The exit door behind me looked normal. A simple fire door. Nothing strange. No welded bars. No rust. No sign anyone or anything had been clawing at it seconds ago. I checked my watch. 8:14 p.m. My breath froze. No, I had been down there for hours. Running. Hiding. Fighting. Talking to myself. Talking to something that looked like me. There was no way I'd imagined the passage of time. I pressed my fingers to the watch face. The second hand didn't move. I pulled my phone from my pocket. 8:14 p.m. The ER doors swung open at the end of the hallway, and a pair of nurses walked out, laughing about something mundane and stupid, coffee spill, maybe. They didn't look at me, didn't notice my torn shirt, didn't notice the wet footprints I was leaving behind. Their voices sounded real, normal, human. Too normal. "Hey!" I shouted, stumbling toward them. "Hey, wait!" They turned, and their faces shifted, not like illusions or melting shadows, just confusion. "Daniel?" one of them said. A young nurse. I recognized her. "Weren't you supposed to be on break?" My mouth opened, but no sound came out. She frowned. "You okay? You look pale." I shook my head. "You don't hear anything? You didn't see?" "Downstairs, there's a floor, B3, and the elevator." Her face softened into gentle concern. The way hospital staff look at patients they need to calm. "Daniel," she said carefully, "this hospital doesn't have a B3. My stomach flipped. "It does. I was just there. There was a wing, ward C, and files, and..." She held up her hands. "Hey, slow down. Maybe sit a minute." Behind her, the other nurse whispered something. I caught fragments. "Overworked? Night shift. Should check on him." I stepped back. My heart screamed to run. The hallway behind me flickered, just once. The fluorescent lights hummed. Normal. But for that fraction of a second, the shadows beneath the exit door behind me stretched too far, like something stood on the other side. My radio crackled sharply on my shoulder. A voice whispered through it. Not layered this time, not monstrous. My own voice, soft, tired. "Daniel, don't stay." I froze. The nurses were still talking, but their voices blurred into background static. My own voice whispered again. "Not tonight. Not again." The hallway lights flickered a second time. 3 times. Then steadied. I turned toward the elevator bay. The middle elevator dinged. Doors slid open. The floor indicator glowed a familiar, impossible number. B3. I backed away so fast I hit the wall. My throat closed. My hands shook so violently I had to press them against my legs to keep them steady. The nurses didn't notice the elevator. Didn't notice anything wrong at all. Only I saw it. Only I heard it. Only I felt the cold draft drifting from inside that impossible floor. The elevator waited. Patient. Silent. Expectant. My radio crackled one final time. A whisper. You never left. The elevator light blinked. The doors stayed open, waiting for me to come back.